All right, guys, she is a director of social media at the Chicago Bears. Jen Tulicki joins us right here on the Business Social. What's going on, Jen?
Hi, how are you, David?
Good. All right, so let's talk about the common mistake that you see. I won't have you name any names, but other sports teams, other NFL teams, like some common mistakes you think they're making that you try your best not to make.
Trying to be somebody you're not. And trying to hit, that grand slam or score that touchdown, like on every single tweet that you do.
Yeah.
And I think it's an understandable, need and want. Everyone wants to make a splash. It's so rewarding, like as hard as we work, when you do hit it out of the park. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand that, you have to pick your moments, and you can't force them. You have to sometimes wait for them to come. But those are the ones that then help you. As long as you're ready, you have to be ready. And as long as you're ready, those are the ones that help you stand out when the time is right for you in your club or your brand.
Yeah, and I think too often people try to get into pop culture, like Justin Bieber and Haley Baldwin are getting married. Like, how can the Bears align? No, please don't do that.
No.
It's like, just because it's trendy doesn't mean you have to be a part of it. All right, so another question I have for you was, how do you approach social? Kind of like, what's your core belief as you dig into your strategy at the Bears?
I think what's at the core of, I shouldn't say I think, I know what's at the core of everything we do is our fans. Mm-hmm. We approach social media and our strategy from the fan perspective, from the fan conversation. And I consider myself very lucky to have a job that allows me to be a fan. I mean, we talked a little bit at the beginning, that I grew up a fan of the Chicago Bears, but I think even if you work for a team that you didn't grow up a fan of, naturally you're going to become a fan of that team and support it and ride the highs and, the lows with that team and feel what the fans feel. And I think that in anything that we do, whether we're winning or losing, we approach things from a fan perspective and really try and take on their mindset and communicate with our fans in a way that is approachable and conversational. And just like if you were walking, through the office, you could stop and talk to us and have a real honest conversation, whether that's share your excitement or your concerns. And we try and be informative in that respect. But really the fan conversation, the fan mentality is at the heart of every piece of content that's created and shared on social, whether it's a social first piece of content, whether it's a video from our video team or an article or photo gallery.
I think you guys do a really good job of this. Like, if there's a period of time where you guys have lost a couple games, like to your point about let's talk to the fan, let's be honest with where we're at right now. Yeah. What are some things that you recommend? Because obviously you can't control what happens on the field,
sure,
but you can control what happens on social. How do you navigate when maybe the fan base is upset or they're kind of rioting when things aren't looking good on the field?
I mean, it's definitely not easy.
Yeah.
I always remember that there's somebody on the other side of things that's a real person with real feelings, like having to consume all of this and react to this. And we're right there with you. Like, we understand the frustration, but at the same time, it is a fine line that we walk, being that fan and representing the organization. And it's not just up to me. It's really, a table of us that will sit down and say, what are we going to talk about this week? What stories are we going to share and tell? How are we going to share and tell those stories? And all of us coming together to make those decisions. And it's finding the bright spots. I think that there's always a bright spot. Last year, we didn't have a great season, but, we were building. And how do we tell those stories to inspire and let people know that hopefully we're going on the right path? What unique stories are there for us to tell is something always worth considering. One that stands out to me last season, Eddie Jackson, he had 2 interceptions in a game that we won, and it was a year to the date that he had broken his leg. I mean, what an incredible stroke of fate. And so we sit down at that table and we say, luckily we won this one, but regardless of focusing on the win, how do we still focus on those personal, unique, and individual stories? And I think that that's something that win or lose, we always take into consideration. And look for the bright spot, but at the same time, acknowledge, we're not where we want to be. We're working, and how are we getting better? And maybe focusing on telling that story. Our guys in the weight room, our guys on the practice field. We're always in control, like you said, of the story that we're telling.
Yeah.
And while we can't control what's on the field, like we are able to control our narrative a little bit. In terms of, yes, this is where we're at, but this is where we want to go.
Yeah, and I think, we've worked together a lot in the past, and I think you've always done a great job of the moments that you can capitalize on, whether it be something as, as simple as Halloween or the draft or the release of the regular season schedule. Those are the moments, kind of the tentpoles throughout your season that regardless of what's happening on the field, you can still come out big and really be, I guess, admired in the industry.
Yeah, 100%. My favorite time of the year, hands down, is around free agency and the draft.
Yep.
Hope is just at an all-time high. And it is so much fun to focus on the excitement of the fans around that time, and the conversation and the chatter around how your team, has the opportunity to get better. And the ability to participate like in those moments and find the unique pieces of content that is really going to help fuel that fire in those conversations. And Halloween was such a fun one a few years ago. I mean, we weren't having a great season, but we were a Monday night game, so one of two teams playing. So how do we do it differently? How do we get people, even if we're maybe not having the type of game that we want to have, to pay attention to us? And we worked and developed these awesome Halloween gifts where it kind of looked like hands were pushing through the gif, and there's a spider that runs across the screen. So again, just trying to develop unique pieces of content and controlling the controllables.
Where do you see the most undervalued attention on social right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that this is going to come as a surprise to a lot of people in the industry, but I think that resources are extremely undervalued. I still think that it's so unfortunate there is sometimes a perception in this industry that our roles are just as easy as hitting a button and, putting something out there and getting, and going viral or getting thousands of likes, and, that is the end goal. And it's not. It really takes not only a social team, you got to consider all the work that goes into strategizing up front. Somebody's got to strategize. Somebody's got to create the content. Somebody's got to kick the content out the door. And somebody then has to analyze the content and do, so that cycle starts all over again. To me, those four roles are like the minimum of how a social team should be staffed. And in a perfect world, you have more than one person creating content. You have more than one person helping getting content out the door and analyze results. So I really think that the importance of resources in our industry and an understanding of all the time and the effort that goes into these roles, 24/7, or social media is 24/7, digital is 24/7. People, your fans expect you to always be available, to always be there for them to talk to. So I think the more as leaders in our industry, the more that we can continue to communicate and advocate for the importance of resources is really, really important.
Yeah, I think, people like Lauren Michaels or Mark Brunette are so respected because they are executive producers and they're putting on this amazing show.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that I'm trying to get across too is like, the Bears, when you're programming Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, it's almost like you're programming your television network.
Yeah.
But for some reason, it's like if CNN has to put on 24 hours of coverage, it's looked at so differently than social. Now, it doesn't have to be 24 hours straight, but still, I mean, we're not there yet. And what do you think we need to do as an industry to get there, to understand they're kind of on the same playing field? You're programming a channel.
Yeah. I mean, I think number one, and this is just leaning on my own experience, but don't be afraid to ask for help and acknowledge that. And hopefully there's somebody in your organization that you feel comfortable going to and having that conversation and explaining, how much time and energy it takes to get it right. And showing examples of that. So finding people who are doing it well, getting to know your peers, and figure out how they advocated for resources or what they're using to make their jobs easier. I think it's really important to speak up and call a meeting and say, hey, this is what we're doing, this is where we're at, and this is where we want to go. But in order to go there, this is what we need to achieve it. And realize that that might not happen overnight, but continue to have those conversations and continue to find, the data that is going to showcase the importance of social media to your brand or your organization.
Well, let me ask you this. What is the size of your current team that's dedicated to social, and where do you see, like in a perfect world, in the next few years, what are the different pieces that you would love to add to kind of make your strategy come to life?
Yeah. Well, when I first started with the Bears in 2015, it was me. I was the social media
one-man show. I remember.
And I remember running around with two phones in my hand, a camera around my neck. Like it was crazy. I appreciate those times. I don't miss those times. And I respect everybody that is going through that grind right now. So obviously we've grown over the last couple of years. My second season, it was myself and a seasonal. My third season last year was myself, a seasonal, and a social content producer. So somebody that was 100% focused on creating social first content. And I think when we looked back once the season ended at those numbers and how much we grew in our output on a platform like Instagram, but also at the same time grew in our engagement, that was such a powerful story to be able to tell across our organization. So now it's myself, our social content producer. I have a full-time social media coordinator. So their role is very much continuing to help get content out the door. Myself and her split that role a little bit, and she's taking, I feel like, more and more of that on every day as I start to do a lot more of the strategizing up front and the analyzing on the back end. And then our seasonal this year, whereas in the past couple seasons, our seasonal was really focused on content that, easy capturing on your phone, Snapchat, things like that. With our coordinator, we feel like we have that under control, and our seasonal, as opposed to committing, their skill set to somebody who can first and foremost help get content out the door, we understood the need for another content creator. So her background is graphic design. And essentially then our team is 2 people that can get the content out the door, 2 people that are creating it, and myself really kind of overseeing all of that. And again, working on that strategy and analysis, but all of us are bringing ideas to the table. And it's not just the 4 of us making the wheels turn either. We have meetings throughout the week with our video department, with our digital department, with the marketing teams, like that are all talking about potential content, potential new content ideas and themes, et cetera. So it's 4 people specifically on the social team, but it is, like you said earlier, many, many more behind the scenes still making it all happen.
So I'm guessing in an ideal world, budget not a concern, you would like to have maybe those folks all full-time, no seasonal, just be able to continue to crank out content?
Yeah, 100%. That at the very least. But I will always take more content creators. I'll take an army of them.
There's never enough.
I can get them. I will take, I envy the Bleacher Reports of the world. That I'm sure.
All you guys need is $100 million, and you can do it.
No big deal.
Well, you've mentioned a lot about doing the analysis on the back end of it. So, how are you measuring success and ROI on your digital feeds personally?
Sure. I have been, and it comes from having the resources that I just spoke about, but I have had more time this year to get into CrowdTangle than ever before. And I'm so glad that I have, because I knew it was a great tool beforehand. And
by the way, everybody probably thinks CrowdTangle sponsors this podcast. That's what everybody says. Very,
it's just
very
truth,
important.
you know? But now I'm in it on a daily basis, and I'm constantly looking at our leaderboard of NFL clubs and gauging our interaction rate, gauging our growth. I think those are two of the most important things to me. Growth doesn't come without a strong interaction rate.
Yep.
So my goal is to always have our club, regardless of our record, be in the top 10 for interaction. And if we're not, it's a bunch of us getting together to say, okay, interactions and engagements were down this week. How do we drive those through the tone of our content, the way that, not just the graphic itself, but how we're teeing that graphic up through the copy. So crowd tangle is a really, really big one. And it's great to not only compare yourselves to others, in your league, but we can look at the Bulls very easily. We can look at all the other sports teams in town and say, what are they doing? How are their fans engaging with them? And
because there's a lot of crossover there.
100%. What conversations are they participating in, outside of their club? What are their fans talking about pop culture wise, et cetera, that maybe we're missing?
I love it. All right. One last question before I forget. What is your personal most engaging tweet of all time that you've pressed send on?
Oh my gosh.
From the Bears account.
Lately, I think it's this season we've had a lot of our final score ones go to the top, which is always very gratifying to send. But I just told somebody this the other day, and they were so surprised. And I didn't quite realize it at first why they were so surprised, but it's because this tweet didn't have anything to do with the score of the game or a particular player. When Twitter last year changed over to 280 characters,
I remember this. Yep.
The three of us at the time got together and said, what are we going to do? And we use hashtag #DaBears. That's our emoji hashtag. And we're like, what if we just threw a bunch of S's on the end of it and took it all the way up to 280? And we feel good about it, but we certainly did not think that it was going to be our most retweeted or most liked tweet ever. But again, I think it just shows the power of being part of the conversation that everybody else is having, even if it's not unique to you specifically.
I love it. All right, so moving on to what I think was the most shocking news of this season was when Khalil Mack got traded from the Raiders. I mean, I've always thought with 22 people on the field from offense and defense that the difference that he's made as one person, and that no different than that first half against the Packers that he showed his worth, his weight in gold. But I think from your standpoint, I'm sure you're drooling when that news comes across your field because that's just ultimate engagement right out the gate.
100%. I mean, I think it was the Packers game earlier this season that as I'm sitting at the game tweeting away, I saw a tweet come from one of my counterparts that said, oh, I'm jealous of all the content that Kind of Funny girl is going to get this season out of Khalil Mack. And it's definitely great. I don't know if we've ever had somebody that is has such conversation value around them. I don't know if since I've been with the Bears, we've had that superstar like a lot of other teams, the OBJs, etc.
And it's such a weird story how the Raiders let him go and the John Gruden. It was very, I think on sports fans' mind, it was just top of mind.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, I wouldn't trade it. I'm glad as a social media director he's a Bear. I'm glad as a fan of the Chicago Bears that he's a Bear. And it definitely he makes our jobs easy. That's for certain. But there's a lot of guys that on our team that do that, and I think everybody has their moments, whether you have that big household name or not. And again, it's up to us to share those moments with.
Oh, Mitchell's 6 touchdowns don't hurt for engagement either. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so from a sponsorship standpoint, I would love to dig in this a little bit. I know for the 4 years of the Bears, I'm sure this has changed dramatically in terms of sponsors being interested on your digital platform. So have there been any partnerships that you think have done really well in terms of being organic enough where your fan base still enjoys the content?
I got to think of a few that come to mind off the top of my head.
I
You
know
know,
Gatorade was something on game day that you guys kind of injected into some of your game day
yeah,
stuff
I
as
think
well.
like this year, for example, like we Gatorade sponsors our Player of the Game
Hmm.
graphic, and we really try and make like any of our sponsored content still feel like really authentic and genuine while we work the sponsor in. And I love that our third-party graphic designers that we use like really worked the splash effect into
Yeah.
the Gatorade graphic. So I think that that content has stood out because obviously it's got some exciting numbers and stats that fans want to consume, want to be able to share like themselves. But just having, that little unique piece stand out that makes it different from a lot of the other graphics that you see is powerful to the people watching it, but it's also powerful to the brand that's paying to
Yeah.
sponsor that content, how they're worked into it. Coffee with Coach, I think, is another fun one that we do that's resonated really well with fans at time. It's a unique, more laid back perspective and conversation with our coach. It's not him at the podium. It's a lot of casual questions. This year, we are taking fan questions earlier in the week before we record that and picking out a unique question to let our fans be part of that segment. So we've seen a lot of conversation, not just around the segment itself, but around participating in what kind of questions do you want to ask Coach Nagy. So that's another
That's
fun
awesome.
for us.
What works best, maybe that something that you would think would be interesting to people that works best for your audience, your fan base, your demo that maybe isn't obvious? Like obviously Khalil Mack, if he sacks somebody, that content
Sure.
works great. But anything over your 4 years that you've A/B tested that you're like, this is interesting that this works with the fan base so well.
Hmm. Interesting that this works with the fan base so well. Um, I I don't want to say something obvious like humor,
Yeah.
but I think that considering where we've been when we haven't always been great on the field,
Well, maybe
that
we should talk about that because when you
yeah.
started, it definitely was more of a PR brand and you kind of injected that. So was that something where you had to start slow and kind of bring it along before you became that?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I remember when I first started and just, bringing some little bit more personality to the account and our tone. People being like, "Whoa, the Bears get a new like social media like manager. Like, what's going on here?" And it was definitely treading lightly, and it was also like making some mistakes along the way and trying, like I said a little bit earlier, too hard to have
Yeah.
that viral moment. Um, at the in a way that wasn't us, that was maybe some forced and not as humble as I think
Hmm.
we now strive to be in the social media space. So that was a learned lesson for me early on, that while humor resonates, we still want to always make sure that we're doing it in a way that doesn't offend anyone and
Right.
isn't controversial. We're not trying to, make a big splash through controversy of any sort. And I think when you are new to this world and you see things like that happening in the social space, it's easy to think, oh, that's what I have to do to win. And I think over time, like we've learned that no, like you don't have to attack.
So another question I want to ask you is, what's the one thing that you wish you could do more at the Bears on social?
The one thing I wish we could do more. Um, I would say that, I mean, I think we already do a very good job of this, but one thing I wish we could do a little bit more is um, is elevate our storytelling.
Hmm.
I think that there's a ton of good examples of how we're doing that already. But I think especially in something like the off season, um, you know, finding those unique opportunities and creating video content that we can adapt to social media, sometimes taking that long form piece and saying, okay, how do we, cut this down and get the most out of it for social media. But storytelling, when I think of visual storytelling, I think about Nike a lot. And I think, hit it out of the park when it comes to emotional storytelling. So while I think that we're already leaning into that, I would love to see us do that more often, whether it's through a video or whether it's through like a just powerful graphic.
Yeah.
We continue to make the time to plan for those moments and tell those unique stories in a way that captures our fans emotionally.
I think every sports fan loves, Hard Knocks and what they do, and just trying to find ways, it sounds like, to kind of micro Hard Knocks, because everybody always loves when you pull back that curtain and kind of tell the story behind the scenes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would love, in a perfect world, I'd love all the access that we could possibly get.
GoPros in every meeting room.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the answer that, like, I want to say, but defaulting, knowing that, we have to be respectful of that space and work hand in hand with the access that we do have, and understand, be appreciative of the access that we have, and use it to the best of like our ability. But of course, I think anybody in this industry would say, I want more access.
Yeah.
So to not say that, I would say I just want us to focus on continuing to tell our players like stories, our fans stories, unique stories.
And that goes back to resources too, because that just takes so much time. It takes a lot of time to produce a very well written, narrative that can tell a story on video or even graphically. So I definitely feel you there. All right. So going to the next 3 to 5 years, where do you see social and the ability to reach your audience, marketing overall, kind of where do you see this thing going?
So what's funny is, I knew you were going to ask me this question, and this was the one that I was like dreading a little bit, because I don't have like this out of the box, like crazy answer for you. To be honest, like I think trying to predict where our industry is going is, for lack of better words, I don't want to say waste of time. It's not. You should always be considering and preparing for the future, but it is just trying to predict the unpredictable. Like, we don't have a crystal ball. And to me, where this industry is going, I kind of leave it up to, the Zuckerbergs of the world, the people who are, behind like these. Well, maybe I shouldn't say it just but you know what I mean. Like,
I know for sure. Yeah.
My field personally is not creating the next Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram or whatever that may be. And if I knew the answer to, where platforms are going next, I'd be that would be where the field that I'm working in, and creating like those types of things. So you see things like IGTV pop up, and I guess like where I try and spend my time more so than being in the business of prediction is setting ourselves up for whatever that next thing may be, to be able to take advantage of it, to feel like we have a team that is nimble. And when something like IG pops up, be able to say, okay, let's have a conversation. What is our strategy like for this? Like, when is the right time for us to enter it, if at all?
Yeah.
And where are our fans? Like, I think your fans or your audience will always tell you where to go, where the conversation is at. And I don't think, I've always been a big advocate that you don't have to be everywhere, but you have to be, one place, or the few places that you're really going to be able to excel in and do it right, as opposed to trying to be everywhere at once and not being able to fully take advantage of it.
What do you think about sports team? We talked earlier in the program about just trying to explain how much time and effort goes into actually doing this thing right. I guess in the next 3 to 5 years, what do you think in terms of growth? I mean, do you think sports teams, NFL teams, will start to see teams 10, 12, 15 deep to do this thing the right way? Because it is reaching so many eyeballs.
Yeah, I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
I think that would make everybody's lives in the industry a little bit easier. But I also think that it just, allows us to cater to our fans even better. There's, so many good ideas that I think unfortunately hit the cutting room floor because there's just not the capacity to do them. And we have to kind of pick and choose our battles and say, okay, even though idea B is a good idea, we like idea A better. And in a perfect world, I think obviously you'd find a time and place to do both.
All right, so I'm gonna finish it off with some rapid fire questions. So hopefully, this is good. All right, so what is one? It sounds like I know the answer to this already from your earlier answer. What's the one social or marketing tool that you cannot live without?
I mean, right now, like CrowdTangle is a big one in terms of understanding um, how our content is performing and how our content's being
It's
received.
not like that competitive analysis too, like how
Yeah,
you stack up.
100%. I
Yeah.
mean, we use Spreadfast a lot too. TweetDeck, I mean, I know that that's open and available to like everybody, but I mean, that's where we listen. That's where the
Yeah.
listening happens, and through listening is how the rest of the magic happens. So, um, yeah, let me ask you that question. What do you think? Like, what's one that you can't like live without?
So from a content management standpoint, Rike, WRIKE, every single project, every single thing we do in the company is runs through that. And I don't want to tell them this, but if they doubled the price right now, I'd have no choice. But I mean, did we just like that's where everything lives? So that's just more of like project management, I think. Does a good job. But same thing. I mean, Crown Table, we've used Spreadfast, we use TrackMaven for the analytical part of it as well.
Yeah,
Sprout
yeah,
Social
that's
too.
what I'm always trying to like learn. I think it's
Yeah.
easy to get comfortable in the tools that you do live in, and there's so many out there. So I'm always interested to see what other people have to say to that question. I'll have to
All
look
right.
at it.
So, from a business perspective, what social platform seems to be working the best for you guys right now?
I mean, we are all in on Instagram. I think that for the past couple of seasons, like we've identified that that is a platform where we have the most opportunity for growth to reach audience that maybe hasn't been as tapped into us before. And I think that it is a platform where you can more easily, even though it's still a challenge, like break through the noise
Yeah.
with just a thumb stopping graphic. And I think it's a platform where people can go to escape a little bit, the noise, the back and forth on Twitter, or some of the, conversation that you might see on Facebook. It's a place where people can go and just scroll and like really be taken away by an amazing photo or an amazing graphic. And it's as easy as a tap to engage with it.
I don't want to know how many hours I spend per day scrolling on Instagram. It's
Yeah.
getting sad.
Have you ever hit the you're all caught up on
No,
Instagram?
you know what? I've never hit that.
So that's good. Then
Okay.
then you've got some some
But
lead.
then I find myself going over to the Explore tab, and that's a
Yeah.
never-ending. Yeah.
Well, I
All
mean,
right.
wait, can I just say one more thing about
Yeah, of
Instagram?
course.
Like the thing is, like to me, I always try and tell people, like in our organization, that managing Instagram is like managing three platforms. Like you have to plan differently for the feed than you do for stories, and you have to plan differently for IGTV than you do those other
Yes.
two things. So really, I feel like over the last year and a half, 2 years, it's become a beast in itself, that platform. Just figuring out how you're going to invest your time into that platform, knowing that there are different options for people right then and there.
Well, I'd love to get your thoughts on this too, because you and I both experimented with IGTV. What do they need to do? Because I just don't think it's fully there yet from like a
Yeah.
user-friendly standpoint. I've talked about this a lot. What do you think they need to do to make that go further?
Um, I mean, I know when you go into Instagram, you get that little bubble like up at the top, but like I think that it's just a little nugget like right there, a little screenshot with some text, and I don't think that that really pulls most people into
It's
let
not
me
enough.
click on this. It's not a
Yeah.
native behavior. I don't think people are going into Instagram to watch Instagram TV. And I think that first and foremost, people are going to, prioritize the feed, prioritize their friends' stories, etc. So to me, Instagram TV is a little bit of an afterthought there. And so I think that
You're asking the consumer to do too many clicks,
yeah,
essentially.
100.
Yeah.
I mean, you're asking some
Yeah.
folks when they log in to Instagram to spend, 30 minutes at least of their time just on that platform. And I think that's a tall order. So any way to make it potentially more prominent, and I don't know the way to do that, but I love the experience of it. The experience, like once you get in there
Yes.
and watch this full screen vertical video, is, in my
Beautiful.
opinion, second to none. It's beautiful. Oh, my lights just went out of my conference room. This is
I
like
can still see you. Yeah,
essential.
this is everything that can go wrong has gone wrong.
I mean, why not? But
Do you have to wave? Is it like timed? Do you have to wave your
no,
hand?
I don't think like I don't think so.
I'm making that a GIF right there too. I love it.
Please do.
All right. So I also talked to Samantha Wood over at the Eagles, and we talked about this a little bit, which is I believe social media now is controlled in the NFL by 40% women.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I mean, what can
Different
I say
from 4 years ago, I'm sure.
Yeah, what can I say besides it's super exciting?
Yeah.
And, I'm pretty close with Sam and a lot of others across the NFL, like men and women. And I know Sam was recently quoted in another article as saying, I look forward to when I don't have to talk about this.
Yes.
It's just kind of the norm. And so while it's exciting, it's a little bit mind blowing to me that it's as
in 2018,
a conversation as it is. Although I do think it's really, really cool that a lot of fans, football fans, sports fans, high percentages of guy fans will, and a lot of times I think if they knew that a girl was talking to them and a girl was the voice behind their account, that their mind would be blown. And it's exciting. I hope it's a trend that continues.
I've really seen a change in the last few years too, even in the NBA, Doris Burke being in the announcer booth. So I think we're going through a cool change right now for that. Social media guilty pleasure follow. I know you're a big Bachelor fan, but I will.
Oh my gosh, I'm the big Bachelor fan. Okay, my number one guilty pleasure follow has to be Thoughts of Dog. I am completely enamored with that account. It brings a smile to my face every single day.
Talk about engagement rate and interaction rate. That account.
Oh my gosh,
well.
you just see it spinning anytime something goes out from that, or we rate dogs. So I mean, what wins in social media more than cute puppies or food? So I am all in every day on Thoughts of Dog. I can't get enough. It's such a nice, cute escape.
All right, so
okay, my lights are completely off. I have to go and turn them on. Okay.
There we go. You're back. It is time. I love it. All right. All right. So you said Instagram number one.
Yes.
Can you rank the other networks for the bear? I always find it interesting because for different feeds, Facebook is still working really, really well. Some brands say that's our last, but Instagram number one. Can you rank with the Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat? Kind of what's working for you guys?
Sure. So I mean, I think it's dependent on KPIs. For example, Facebook is always going to be still our number one referrer to the website, which is super important to us, but it's not the platform where if we're looking to go and engage our audience that we're going to focus on. With growing and engaging our audience being our number one focus, I would say Instagram first, Twitter second. We're probably not growing on Facebook, but in terms of engaging and commentary and driving people, I would say that would be our third priority. And Snapchat, I hate to say it, but it's kind of fallen off to the fourth because a few years ago it was number one. I was putting so much time and energy into it. And actually the Bears were the last of the 32 NFL clubs on Snapchat. Because we just didn't have the resources, really. And then once we got on it, and we were measured and when we were getting on it, we said, okay, we know we're the last team. When are we going to do it? How are we going to do it right? And we jumped on in April a couple of years ago, right before the draft. We were talking about all that conversation, after when the season ends, conversation dips, and then it starts to rise again around the draft. So that's when we decided to get active in Snapchat. The draft was in Chicago that year, so we had a lot of unique access. And it was a huge priority for us, but it's just really hard to quantify your success there and the investment of time and energy that goes into that platform.
I know, and I feel bad for him in a way. Yeah, I feel bad for him in a way because Instagram completely ripped him off once they saw that it worked. And I used to be in Snapchat all day, every day. But to your point, I'm not on it as much, and it's something that a lot of my clients too just don't put a lot of effort into.
I think it's hard to discover like brands in there now. Like you really have to seek them out. Whereas like on Instagram or Twitter, like, hopefully they're bubbling up to the top of your feed. I love Snapchat for at its core. I feel like it's a communication tool. I'm in group chats with my sisters like on there. I'm sending people, quick little inside jokes, things like that. And for that, I think it's great.
So it's almost becoming more of a WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger than it is
100%.
actually an Instagram. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what it was in the beginning. And then brands jumped on it and tried to make it something else and said, we got to be here. And now it's like, well, do we have to be here? I don't know.
I think it comes back to your point about IGTV too. Like, if you're going to be a place where brands go and content is there, it needs to be a little more user-friendly. It needs to be easier. Don't make me click 4 different times. All right. In our industry, FOMO is a major thing. So I always ask this question: how does Jen keep up on all the different algorithm changes? Is there any newsletters or any feeds that you follow that you would recommend others do as well for that?
I would recommend in this industry, like getting to know your counterparts and your peers and leveraging each other for insights. So much of, I think, what gets brought to my attention is something that one of my peers sees and sends through, like I just said, a group chat or a text message. I think The Verge is a great account for industry news. I feel like I see a lot about Instagram updates there before I see, the update from the platform itself, even if they tweet it out at the same time. But I feel like it's our peer network that is kind of always, we 32 clubs, we have a group chat on Facebook too, where there's just countless people in it right now. And somebody gets a little nugget of information. And it's like, hey, did you guys see this today? So I think like making sure that you're networking in the right way with the right people is a great way to stay on top of industry trends.
All right. Any advice for your fellow hashtag SM Sports peoples or anyone wanting to get into team social?
Yeah, I mean, my answer to this is a couple of things. One, social media is not as always as glamorous as it seems. It is at times, but it is a ton of hard work and effort. And I lose sleep at night thinking about social media. I have nightmares about tweeting out something that I
Do you lucid dream like ways that you can get better? And
I mean, yeah, it's all over the place. It's never ending. It's like literally obsessive about it at times. And so I truly believe that to be successful in this industry, you have to be both professionally and personally invested into it. Social media for me does not stop when I leave the office. At the end of the day, like I go home and I usually have a couple of work things that I still need to do. And if I don't, like I'm sitting there scrolling on my phone and looking on Twitter and being inspired by other content out there, other conversations, or you see a conversation that is, super relevant to your brand and you weren't planning on participating and, thinking that you had the night off, but you're like, I got to jump into this.
Yeah. So you have to love the hustle, love the game of it.
You really 100% do. But with that said, you got to be able to turn it off, I think, at times too. Otherwise, you'll just completely fry yourself.
How do you do that? I'm asking for your advice on that.
You just say to yourself, I need a mental break. I'm going off the grid. You let the other people, on your team know, I got to get away from it.
Leave me alone.
And to be honest, when I say I got to get away and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take like the day, I'm not going to be on social a ton. I usually just need a couple hours here or there to like reboot and like rejuvenate. But it's just got to be a conscious decision. You've got to be okay with it. You've got to know that you're going to miss something. I think, to your point, and you've got to be okay with that. And I think it took me a long time to get comfortable with that, being like, what, trending hashtag or conversation am I going to miss? And, there are times where you look and you're like, oh, I would have had the perfect piece of content for that. But that's okay. That's not your moment.
And going back to the players too, these guys can't work out 23 hours a day in order to get better. Like at some point, you can only give so much, and you got to kind of rest. So I like that.
David, one thing I just want to say, like to other people trying to get into the industry, is like I think that your presence on social media is so important. Like when I was reviewing
your personal brand, you mean?
100%. Like your personal brand, like when I was reviewing resumes, like for the roles that like we've hired for, as curious as I am about what's on your resume, like I want to know first and foremost, like what your handle is, and I want to be able to go and check it out and see what you're talking about, what you're tweeting about. Are you a liability for our brand or our organization? Do you get the industry? Are you personally participating in those conversations, even if it's not your job? I think that is huge, like for people to be cognizant of and on top of.
Yeah, you're applying for a social media manager, but you haven't tweeted since 2014. 100%. That's a problem.
Yeah.
All right. So my last thing I always ask is if you can recommend anyone. You mentioned that you really take initiative when it comes to your network. Is there anybody in your network that you think would provide value to this show? And if so, would you like to recommend them to the next episode or nominate them for the next episode of the podcast?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
And you know what? She just did another podcast, but deservedly so. Allie Raymond at the Cleveland Browns, bless her, for just what that girl has gone through and how in stride she's taken it, and how kind of like how strong she's been through the losing.
How do you run a social media feed when you're 0-16? Like that's a legitimate show right there.
And she does it, and she does an amazing job of it. She understands the industry. She understands, how to adapt your brand, like regardless of the circumstances, to your fans. And she's definitely somebody that I talk to regularly. I mean, we didn't go 0-16, but we were kind of in a low spot. So misery loves company.
You guys shared a tear together, yeah.
Yes.
Right on. Well, there it is. Thank you so much, Jen, for joining us on the Business of Social, and we'll do it again sometime soon.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you. All right, guys. Wow, a lot of good stuff there. I think the one thing I took away from the show was the fact of you're going to miss something at some point. If you're going to, you can't be on social 24/7. I like her and I's conversation there towards the end about finding a way to unplug, as everybody thinks that they have to be on at all times in order to be successful on social. Also, like I said on the show, I think we might have a sponsorship ready for CrowdTangle. So many people in this industry are really big on that tool, and that's really how they rank themselves amongst their peers and their engagement rate. So anybody out there that has not yet checked it out, I think we all highly recommend it here on the show, both the host and also the guests. So I hope you guys found a lot of value out of it. Once again, wanted to thank Auntie Lightning, Christy Dishner, and Will Kelly filling in here on the Business of Social podcast. We'll see you next time.